These were specifically modified for the Middle East. So you had 4-door cars that had a 3-speed on-the-floor shifter. So it was like a Saginaw 3-speed. And they had their most anemic engine, which was like a 229 cubic inch V6. How much do you think it made, like as far as horsepower? Like back then, 80s, like how much horsepower do you think it made? 12. Yes, it made a little more than 12. It made a little more than 12 horsepower. But it actually made 110 horsepower. So that's, I mean, it's pretty much a rocket ship.
In some ways, that's actually surprising. That's a lot for them.
Yeah. But as you can imagine, it was carbureted, and when you get it into the desert with a lot of heat, it probably didn't make 100 horsepower. So in order for them to go to the Middle East, they also had to do things like undercoating because they would get sandblasted. They also needed a heavy-duty cooling system, which, knowing GM, was probably just like a thermostat that opened 1 degree cooler. And then they had no heaters, because why would you need heaters in the desert? Other than at night when it gets really cold.
Yeah.
So these cars got shipped over, about 13,000 got shipped over in kind of the first batch. And almost immediately they had issues. Because even though they had a heavy-duty cooling system, they overheated. And since they didn't have a heater, you couldn't do the trick where, you know, you put the heater on and then act as a second radiator because, you know, they didn't have one. Then they had a problem with the transmissions. They just didn't shift correctly. People were complaining about them shifting, and if you're trying to use it as a taxi, you kind of need something to move. So there was a little bit of controversy as far as like whether Iraq was like making this up because they were currently in a war with Iran. And they were like, maybe they want to kind of back out of the deal or something. But GM was like, if you're actually having issues with these cars, we're gonna send over some mechanics. So they sent over 100 Canadian mechanics to Iraq in the early 80s to essentially, what was a war zone, to fix this fleet of cars, and they still weren't very good. I don't know if there's some crazy garage in Iraq with like a bunch of these pristine automobiles never touched. They were used as taxis a little bit in Iraq, but then I think a lot of them broke down because they didn't have parts, they didn't have dealerships that could service them, and they just weren't very reliable in the first place. There were actually some photos of these cars being carted around by horses. Which is...
Oh, no. Like, did they just take the front wheels off?
No, I mean, it's the whole car. The whole, like, there's a horse and it's pulling the entire car. So it's just a trailer at this point.
Okay.